What's up? Welcome to the Existential Stoic Podcast. Do you have questions that you want to ask, but you just don't know how to ask them? Do you ever struggle asking questions? Well, today you're in luck because we're going to talk about how to ask questions. I'm Danny with my buddy Randy. What's up, Randy?
Yo, Danny.
Yeah, why? I mean, why do you think questions are important? Do you think we should ask more?
Well, one thing that I've realized is that people love to answer questions because it gives them a feeling of
Yeah,
importance. And just by asking questions, like I find that it actually builds rapport with people. Asking questions that they want to answer, because then they're like, it's just like, oh, they get this huge ego trip and they love it and they feel important. And all of a sudden you're so much closer.
dude, it's true. It's actually funny. It's like that's like a great tactic for like building relationships. Is just keep like and for conversation, just ask questions because people love it. They love to answer questions. They love hearing themselves talk. They feel in an important position, and it's super simple. You just don't have to do
Mhm.
anything. Yeah,
Except for when you're trying to pick up a girl, then you never ask questions. You just make statements.
nothing.
Because every
Yeah,
other guy just asks her questions and she's bored to tears with it. So don't do that in
yeah.
that case. But
It's just talk. There's two different situations. All right.
yeah.
So today we have tips to help people ask questions. I'm going to start since it's my week. So my first one's actually pretty simple. It's just ask. Don't be afraid. I think like most of the time, when we have a question we want to ask, we get our imagination sort of we let it run wild. We get afraid. We get scared about what the answer might be instead of just asking it and finding out and getting that information and then going from there. So I think asking is the first step.
Yeah, I like that one so much. I was kind of jealous that I didn't put it because there's that saying, you have not because you ask not. Like most people, ask and it shall be given. Most people don't have what
Yeah.
they want because they just don't ask for it. Like think about
Yeah.
how often you want to help people and you just don't because they didn't ask you to. It's just, everybody's
It's
looking to
funny.
help you. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought of it because I was actually listening to the Sony Alpha podcast. It's just about like photographers that are in the business and like how they got there and all. It's interesting. But the one guy was just saying last week, or I can't remember. But they were talking about they moved to New York, they had to start over, and they were like they were afraid at first, but then they were like, then I just started talking to people, and I realized I just had to ask for what I wanted. And once I started to do that, I got it. And it's like, yeah, exactly. Most people will help you out if they can. Like it's really funny, but we like freeze up and don't. We think we have to do it ourselves totally.
Yeah, we're afraid of asking. Which actually brings me to my first one, which is be bold enough to be stupid. So in school, for some reason, they always keep telling us that there's no such thing as a stupid question. And because they say that so often, we're like, every question must be a stupid question. So we're all afraid to actually ask questions because we don't want to be stupid. We don't want to ask the question that somebody's like, well, duh, you know?
Yeah.
But I've found that as I'm getting older and dumber, asking these questions is actually good because if I have that question, that means a lot of other people have that question too, and they're all afraid to ask it. And just because I don't really care that much about looking stupid because I already know I am, well,
Yeah.
then I can ask the question, I get the answer, and they get the answer too. It helps everybody.
Dude, yeah, it's like such a good one because I can't tell you how many times I get so frustrated in my classes where I'm like, just ask. Because like it's like especially like when you're teaching, like it's hard to anticipate the first time you interacted with that material because it's been, a long time. So it's like you need students to ask even, the quote unquote stupid questions because they're the ones that are like usually the hardest. They're the ones that are like usually blocking further understanding. They're getting in the way, but they're also the ones that like everyone needs to know and everybody wants to know. Like it's really
Well, it's
funny.
like the only stupid questions are the ones you didn't ask, because
Yeah.
those are
Yeah.
those are the ones where like you really wanted to know that information, but you're too afraid to, and that's just being stupid because then you're just wasting an opportunity.
Yeah, it totally is. I like that one. That's a good one. Just ask. Don't be afraid to be a fool. All right.
Hmm.
My next one is know what you're actually asking. So know what you're asking for, know what you're asking about. And I say this because I think a lot of times like we are, if we get bold enough when we are asking questions, sometimes we'll just ask questions without actually really having any like real meaning for asking them or reason for asking them. So like know what you're asking the question for, what you want, what it's about. That way it's like it's purposeful. Make use of your time. Make it valuable because you're taking up someone else's time too as well.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great one. Actually, knowing what I mean, maybe not the exact answer you're looking
Yeah.
for, but knowing what you're looking to get from the question. That's a very good one. My next one is, well, so this comes from I enjoy watching detective shows, And I also used to be a veterinarian, which is like being an animal detective, trying to figure out what diseases or whatever's going on. And so, like, one of the things that you learn very early on, if you want to be half decent at your job, is don't ask leading questions, or to put it another way, ask open-ended questions. So
Yeah.
instead of asking a directed question, like, oh, is your cat peeing outside of the litter box or something like that? Then the person will be like, yeah, they did. You could ask something like, oh, is anything changing with how your cat's urinating? So that way
Hmm.
it's a lot more open-ended. So then they could be like, oh yeah, he's actually, peeing on the door and he's peeing at the window, which would mean a lot more than if the cat was peeing every 5 minutes outside the litter box. But if you just ask the directed question, you're going to get an answer that you're looking for as opposed to the real answer. So anyways, that brings me to how to ask questions. Don't ask a directed or leading question. Ask more of an open-ended question that allows the other person to fill in more information.
That is actually a really, really crucial point, I think, about question asking, because you're right. When you ask leading questions, you basically make it so that the answer can only be in one form or of one type. When you ask open-ended, you give the person room to actually, say everything. I think the litter box example is great because, like, if there's problems peeing, there might have been other instances. It might have manifested in different ways, and they have the freedom now to answer all of those and explain the actual situation. Whereas before, you're just saying, you're giving them room to only say one thing. And I
Yeah,
think
and
it's a good
for
one.
people who have difficulty with the open-ended versus directed questions, if the answer is yes or no, you're asking a directed question.
Yeah, yeah,
Simple,
yeah.
simple enough.
Yeah, no, open-ended are great. I think they're also open-ended questions are really fantastic to ask yourself when you're trying to learn something as well, because it forces you
Mm.
to really like explore in broad detail different things.
Particularly the how can I? That's a great
Yes,
open-ended question.
like the best
That'll open
question. It
up
really
doors
is.
for you. Hmm.
Yeah, just explores possibilities. Awesome. All right, my last one is and this I was thinking too, especially like when you're trying to learn something yourself or you're trying to figure something out. Always ask the next harder question. So like when you have a question, stop, think about what it is, and then try and formulate a harder question. Ask yourself, what's the next question? What's the next level up from this question? I do that a lot because, like, I think, like, especially when when I was in school and stuff, and I was trying to learn like difficult philosophies and stuff. I would always try to ask myself, like, well, what's a deeper question than this, or what's a deeper level of question, or what's a harder question to ask? Because it kind of gets you thinking about it in a different way, and it's very helpful to sort of help you expand your understanding of something.
Now, do you ask that harder question after you get the response from the first question, or is this when you think of the first question before you ask it, you think, well, what's
Yeah,
the more difficult question?
it really just depends on like how confused I was and like whether I was on my own. Let's say like if I had somebody there that like if I had somebody there I could directly interact with, I would just like usually ask first, then try to figure out the next harder one from there. If I was by myself, it was just a way to push myself to kind of keep trying to understand the material at a deeper level. Right. If
Hmm.
that makes
Okay,
sense. Yeah.
awesome. I like that one. That one's good because they say, the better questions you ask, the better answers
Yeah.
you get. So
Yeah.
by asking more difficult questions, you're going to get better answers. Which brings us to my last one, which is listen to the response. So actually ask the question because you actually want to learn something. Like we've had the experience recently in our programming boot camp where like a lot of people ask questions just to listen to themselves talk and talk about how much stuff they know. And in the end, they didn't ask a question at all. But like
Nope. It's just a
they started
statement.
with I have a question, and then they just go on and on and on and on and on about all the stuff that they know. And
Yeah.
so like that's not really a question. That's like a complete ego trip. Uh, but which comes back to, make sure that you're asking a question because you actually want to learn something and then listen to what the other person has to say.
No, it's such a good point too, because I think, the premise of asking a question is you're asking someone who theoretically knows a bit more than you for assistance in this area. And so you should give them the respect of actually listening and wanting a response. And I think what you pointed out is so true because like when people do that where they just want to hear themselves talk, it's like one, they don't have enough humility to actually ask questions. And it's just annoying, And it's also like you're just wasting time because you're not
Mhm.
adding to anybody's understanding, you're not helping anybody else understand, and you're not asking questions that other people have either, which would be way more valuable, than wasting
Mhm.
our time with this nonsense. Yeah, I think you see it
Mhm.
all the time. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, definitely.
um, Plus, you learn so much when you actually listen to the damn answer. I mean, come on. That's why you ask the
Yeah.
question.
I mean, the
All right.
Socratic method was just asking, or was it asking
Yes,
questions?
it was. The
Yeah,
Socratic
yeah.
method was just kind of like it was getting somebody else to see that they kind of know the truth by just asking questions. So it's like it's just a series of deeper and harder questions till you get to where you realize that you realize you don't know what you're talking about, basically.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about this a little bit before. I know we're going to wrap this up soon, but we talked this about a little bit before. When you're trying to find out like the reason why people do stuff, you have to ask them why multiple times because the first time is like the answer that they're socially supposed to give, and then the answer is that the next one is the one that they think you want to hear, and then eventually you get down to the real reason why. So yeah, it's
Like
important to ask questions.
25. It's like
Yeah.
yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. Isn't it funny? There's like our social interactions are like totally built on like just multiple layers of lying to each other.
I
You know what I
know,
mean?
right?
Like being dishonest. How do you
Yeah.
feel? Good. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like all this like it's so funny. It just
All
cracks
trying
me
to
up.
make other people believe we're doing okay and we know what we're doing.
When no one has any clue. Oh
Yeah.
my God, it's so funny. Well, so that's it for this quick fix, how to ask questions. Check us out later in the week. We'll have another full length episode. Um, look, watch the videos on YouTube, listen wherever you get your podcast, like, subscribe, share. It helps us out a lot. Until then, though, later, Andy.
Later, Danny.